I'm Miss Complexities, host of Complexities podcast. I talk about healing from trauma, mostly relational to complex PTSD. Yeah. This video is going to be a little different. Most of my videos, the video blogs that I've done on YouTube and on IGTV, have been about things that I've overcome, things that I've rewritten in my mind, and my advice for how you can try to do the same thing, things that I've learned along the way. And for a while now, I've been thinking about, hey, I need to, talk about the shit that I'm not really good at, to prove that I'm a person, too. And so something really great happened last night, and I was gonna, I don't know, I just want to tell you guys about it and talk about my biggest trigger. The one that I haven't overcome. Well, there's plenty I haven't overcome, but I think in the last 5 years, I've done a lot of changing, and so a lot of my triggers have either altered in a way or kind of just slipped away, or maybe they just don't affect me as much anymore. But since my kids started school, my daughter's in 3rd grade, so it's been 3 years since she started school, I realized that, I had a lot of memories come back because I don't remember 3/4 of my life. And children have a great way of reminding you of your childhood, which has been very healing for me, but also sometimes holy shit, I'm really fucked up. But last night I was working with my son doing his homework, and this is a trigger or an emotional flashback. What is an emotional flashback? An emotional flashback is when you emotionally move back to or re-experience something from the past that was traumatic. So people who have PTSD, and the way they portray it in the movies is that a soldier is, hearing a car backfire and all of a sudden he's transported back to a war scene. It's kind of like that, but less war scenes and less visual. An emotional flashback is a feeling. And so for me personally, and for the people that I know who I've talked to about their flashbacks, it's like I can feel like I'm back in some sort of situation that I was in when I was younger. So a lot of times I emotionally flash back to my dad's house and the feeling of being his prisoner, the feeling of just not being safe, the feeling of all the things that go into a narcissist. So yesterday I'm sitting there, it's way past bedtime, my son finally is like, oh, I didn't tell you, my homework's not done. And so right before we get in bed, he has to do his homework. And he's 6, so getting a 6-year-old to do 2 pages of homework is kind of difficult. And it had already been a long evening, it was past bedtime, and we were all tired and stressed out. So, and like I said, I've known about this flashback, this trigger, since my daughter started school and I started doing homework with them. And what happens is I flash back to a very young time in my life where I would sit in my room with my dad, or I would be, at a table with my dad, and he would just be standing over my shoulder yelling at me. I think there were several things that went into me and my dad clashing about homework, and that was I was severely dyslexic, to the point where I didn't learn to read till I was 8, and nobody really knew what was happening. Nobody took the time to care what was happening. They just thought I was stupid or that I wasn't trying. That was my dad's main thing. He would spend hours every night telling me, you're not trying, you need to do better, why can't you just do this? And so he would just stand over my shoulder and yell at me for 3 hours every evening until homework was finished. And I was standing over my son's shoulder, getting frustrated about, come on, dude, we gotta write this down, we gotta get this done. And yeah, it's just like totally right back into it. And I guess the magic power, the shitty part about emotional flashbacks is that you can literally feel transported back to that incident or that time. And yeah, I started getting really frustrated, and I had to like leave the room because I was gonna get upset. And afterwards I explained to my son, like, hey, like literally I just explained what I explained to you, because I'm very honest with my kids, and I tell them about my triggers, and I tell them about my flashbacks, and I tell them about my childhood in a age appropriate way. And he understood, and I think we can move past it, and it's not like we're gonna have like a huge lifetime fight about it, but it is so hard for me to sit down and do homework with my kids, and I hate that. I hate that I can't do something as simple as sit down and help my son write, like 10 sentences on a page. But it's who I am. It's part of my life. And I've told my kids about it. I've told my husband about it. Most of the time, he's the one that does homework with them, just because I usually work in the evenings, or I use the excuse that I have to make dinner and I don't want to do it. But I had to do it last night, and it just, it was one of those times where you're like, oh, you think you're so healed, and then you just get really humbled by a flashback. And I guess at first it was a little disconcerting and annoying that, like, I haven't made any headway on this particular emotional flashback, but I guess at the same time I haven't really done any work on it, so I can't expect to heal it. But I think the reason I'm making this video now is that, and this is one of the reasons that I did the podcast too. In my research of trying to find other people healing from complex PTSD, I found no one like me. I found no one who was a parent. I found no one who was in a healthy, if we can call that my relationship with Patty Face healthy, long-term committed relationship. I didn't find people like that. I found a lot of single people who were solely focused on themselves, which is wonderful, but it's not really helpful for me. So I'm making this video, and I do the podcast because it is possible to have children. It is possible to have relationships and still have complex PTSD and still not be completely healed. But on the flip side, it is still very possible, and this happens all the time, and this is how I got complex PTSD. People get married, people have kids, and they don't realize how much their past trauma has affected them, and they do nothing to heal it, and they just send it on to the next generation. And that's what I'm working really hard to prevent with my children, and this is why I talk about it, because I don't want kids to grow up like me. I don't want my kids to grow up like me. And but it is possible, because I had a emotional flashback. I was completely thrown back to some of the worst times in my childhood, and I was able to hold it together, not destroy my children emotionally or physically, and walk away from it in relatively a good place, and even really strengthen the relationship that I have with my kids. They have a better understanding of me and where I come from, and I think they're very empathetic people because of so much of what I share with them. And yeah, so I have flashbacks still too, and there is a healthy way to have children and to have complex PTSD, and there is a way to stop the cycle of abuse. There's a way to prevent your children from being abused by you, and ending that cycle. Like, that's what I really saw last night, was my dad standing over me, and then me standing over my son, and me breaking that cycle. And that's why I do everything I do, because I want to break the cycle.